fill my
Our creativity, Eurydice, is it's a gift from the gods, and like every gift, it's also a burden and an addiction and a parasite. So when you were gestating your daughter, she was busy sucking calcium out of your bones, right? That's what fetuses do. And so right now, the things that we want to create, they are sucking out our life force a little bit, and that's what they're for. And we are ready to give them that because there are other children, and they have their needs to be born. That's what I would say.
Okay. So you think it's more an internal process than...
Yeah, and I think it's very good. Yeah, that's very good, because it may mean that you have something extremely important, inside you.
Yeah, maybe, because I haven't felt this before. I just haven't. In fact, there's always been the dynamic, as I know it, is that, the world wants me to do this, and I feel much more comfortable once I reach my understanding, and I feel complete for myself to not do what the world wants me to do, to not perform on stage. But this is, but this is a little bit like, it's big. Yeah, it's bigger than myself. So maybe that's a good way to think about it. That's a good way to think about it.
So I'm very proud of you, and
be proud of me when I finish.
Well, I'm proud of you because you're listening to that voice.
Yeah,
that's all we can do. All we can do is our best. Yeah, who knows? Intoxication and intercourse is happening right now, because I am intoxicated by you, God, and we are having intellectual
intercourse. All right, let me start this thing. That sounds like a good point. Welcome to Speak Sex. I'm your host, Eurydice, and today's guest is William T. Vollmann. He is a writer of, he will correct me, but something like 20 books of many thousand words each, and each book pretty close to a masterpiece. He's a writer's writer, and we're going to talk about, intellectual intercourse.
Why not?
Right?
Why not? I mean, we're trying to celebrate Valentine's Day, aren't we?
Exactly, yeah. So thanks for coming on the podcast, Bill.
Thank you so much for having me, Eurydice. I really appreciate it, and I've always admired you and wanted to be a closer friend to you, and so I feel very pleased to have a nice talk with you now.
Yeah, likewise. It's just the same. I think that we've known each other, not daily, but we've known each other for a long span of time. I don't know 30 years, something like that. So that feels good.
Yeah, I would say since the late Jurassic period, 'cause I can remember seeing some dinosaurs and ferns. It was actually a long time before fire was invented, and then the creation of fire, I think, came about because you're such a hot chick.
Yeah, so prehistoric times until now, it's a little, it's a stretch.
So we've known each other for
eons. Yeah. But we are in this 2022, believe it or not. And so I want to discuss with you, I guess, manhood and eroticism, the inner feminine, the inner masculine, the way we we have and haven't separated sex from procreation. The difference between, sex and for love, sex for pay, sex for pleasure. It all feels to the people out there a bit muddled. And I know that for you, as for me, creativity and writing is a form of transgression, just as, sex is, and it's also a form of transformation, right?
Very true.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, tell us whatever you want on this topic.
Well, I will do my best, Eurydice. Let's see. Well, on the subject of the inner feminine and the inner masculine, I remember when I was still an adolescent and I started reading some of the work of Carl Jung. And I'm still not sure how much of Jung I agree with, but he's really, really inspiring. And, most of the things that psychoanalysts propose are things that cannot be proved. But I guess you can talk about induction. Someone says, well, this is a certain kind of psychic or emotional process, and everybody seems to go through this, and you can't prove or disprove that, but you can read it and say, oh, yeah, now when I hear this, I think that I go through this, so it seems to be true. And one of the things that really fascinated me when I first started reading Jung was the idea of the anima and the animus. And for those who are listening who maybe have not studied those, the anima is the female component inside of a man. And the animus, of course, is the male component inside of a woman. And I was brought up in a very traditional family, in which, boys didn't cry. And when I'd go to the barber, I'd get a crew cut and he would call me killer. Those were the days. So the idea that there was some sort of female inside me was quite strange at first. And then the more I thought about it, the more I started thinking it's very, very useful and interesting, and also wouldn't it be nice if in heterosexual attraction, at least, it's not just a case of opposites attract, somebody with a cock and somebody with a cunt, and that's all it is. But if there was some sort of reaching toward understanding, toward feeling what the other person feels, and how could I ever hope to know what it's like to be a woman without empathy, without some feeling that I could imagine myself, at least some way, as a woman, and that if I could do that, it seems to me that I would be a better man, a more loving man, more able to please women and understand them and be a lover and a friend. So when I was small, when I was 9 years old, my 6-year-old sister drowned in a pond, and it was partly my fault. I was supposed to be babysitting her and I didn't do a good job.
Yeah,
and,
well, it wasn't your fault, but anyway, it was perceived, I'm sure, by your innocent psyche.
That's right.
Yeah, it was clearly not your fault. You were a child. You're not the adult. I'm sure it was no one's fault, but if there's ever innocence, the innocence is with the child. So
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
One of the things that Jung talks about is active imagination.
Mm-hmm.
That you try to get in touch with some other form of yourself and speak to that person and listen. And there have been times in which I felt really, really sad and lonely and damaged. And so when I was in my 30s and 40s, I thought, well, why not, talk to the little Bill inside me, who's suffering, and maybe I could tell him something to make him feel better, or maybe I could come back from it learning something from him that makes me feel better.
Mm-hmm.
And my parents used to keep a picture of Julie and me, and I had a little crew cut, and she was next to me. And so I started trying to talk to the little boy with the crew cut, and instead, quite often I would see, a sad little girl with brown hair, who was my sister, and sometimes, she was all wet and covered with mud, dead, pulled out of the bottom of the pool, and she was really, really sad and really cold and wet and lonely, and I realized that when I was talking to her, I was talking to some version of myself.
Mm-hmm.
In a slightly different, I think, manifestation of the same thing, I realized that the only kind of porn that I really like to watch is lesbian porn.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really interested in seeing a male body because I'm sufficiently drawn to women that I not only like to be attracted to one, but occasionally to be one or to imagine myself as one.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really think that both of these phenomena basically are aspects of my anima, and that since we're talking about love and sexuality and Valentine's Day, I feel that focusing on my anima as well as my male persona is very healthy for me and helps me to love better. So what do you think?
Well, first of all, I totally agree with it in general, like for the entire male population. I think that we would all be better, happier people if, all men felt at ease, wearing makeup or women's clothes, or without having to necessarily, I know that you did take a name, right, Dolores, and you wrote a book, or did some other work, photography, I think. So you actually created your feminine as an alternate self in the world. But to begin with, I just feel very drawn to men who are, free enough and comfortable enough to try all kinds of expressions, to give themselves the right, to not be so limited by the patriarchy, by the censorship of their job in this, kind of very hierarchic and narrow-minded culture. So like in college, like when I was, 16 or 17, I dated like, the only guy in school who would change his hair color and would wear like a little skirt over his, pants.
Good for him.
Because I always, and I'm still, I'm always attracted and interested in people who have some sort of like natural androgynous tendencies. And I don't mean physically, like I don't at all mean, like the way that their body looks. What I mean is the way that they, allow their body to be in the world. I think that the liberation of men is long overdue. So my opinion is that, the liberation of women has put aside, what should be the kind of like attendant liberation of men from the patriarchy. And finding your inner feminine like that and giving her voice and you have given her an identity. I think it works for for that cause.
Well, one thing I would like to ask you is, you remember in the symposium, when Socrates imagines a time in which everybody was a hermaphrodite, and then people were separated into male and female, and so part of attraction and desire is longing for that other part of you. And I'm thinking, is that not just interesting and partially true, but is it completely true, or is there something else in there? I tend to think that that love, attraction, whatever, is a combination of similarity and difference. If you have very, very strong political opinions, for instance, then you might choose your lover based on similar opinions. You might not be able to stand someone with different opinions. But on the other hand, you don't want somebody who is exactly like you in every way. And of course, it would be impossible to find somebody like that. So it's a very, very, really an infinitely beguiling mystery as to how and why it works. What's the magic recipe for the amount of similarity and difference that we want and that we can provide to others? What do you think?
Well, I do think that the perfect, let's say that, as close to perfect as can be, the perfect match is the match of opposites. And that the reason that is rare is that it requires more trust than average, right? So when you're with someone who is not your like, you have to take a greater leap of faith and sustain it in the trust that we together are complete. And even though you're not in the consciousness of your mate, of your partner. So, and I think that that kind of trust has been corroded in our time, even more than it was in Plato's time, because we're even more focused on the individual rather than the, cooperative or the collective. So we forget that all of our knowledge is collective, that, we can only know ourselves through others. We forget all that. And we kind of
That's right.
live on this, vain assumption that, we're a monad, which makes it harder to really, become one with each other.
What do you think it would be like, Eurydice, to become one?
What do I think it would be like in emotionally or
perfectly one? Yeah, emotionally, spiritually. I mean, I'm sure we've gotten close. Maybe we've achieved it, and in which case you could just say, "What is it like for you?"
I have not, I have not achieved it. No, I think that I have ephemeral. I have gone through periods of being in that state, and it's extraordinary. It's just, again, it's a freedom from the self, which is extraordinary, and it's a. It's all these things that, that we talk about when we talk about love, right? So, being able to be complete, and yet, be always kind of, be complete, but not be satisfied, right? Be complete, but always be in process, and kind of like right on the verge of more. Be complete and yet be becoming, but not on your own. So you're not in control of it, right? I think that that's that state. But I think that what gets in the way of it is really our culture. I mean, in my case, anyway, what has got in the way of keeping this up, let's say, for years, has inevitably been culture, meaning cultural expectations, let's say, marriage or the family of either partner, the definitions of roles, trying to fit something extraordinary into very ordinary roles and parts, and then fit it into the society the way it's built. It kind of like damages that connection. It creates cracks. And then, of course, we, if we apply on that kind of like sublime, let's say, erotic union, if we apply all the pedestrian rules of our engagement, what is monogamy, what is polyamory, what the endless kind of like rules of our engagement retroactively, without having made like a clear agreement before before you take the leap of faith, that also damages it. It creates doubts. It feeds these doubts. Yeah.
Can you tell me more?
Tell you more. What's the question?
Well, what would that leap of faith mean to you? How would you describe it, and how would you know when it's appropriate?
Well, again, I think that it defies words. So, it's not something that's easy to talk about, because you know it when you're in it, and when you're in it, you are happy. You are just inexplicably and almost, dumbfoundedly happy. And you're happy the whole time. It's that sense of absolute satisfaction, just being next or in the vicinity of the partner who should be your partner.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Well, if that's the case, Eurydice, then it may be that there's no such thing as what people dismissively call mere infatuation. that when you're infatuated, in fact, that's when you are taking or even being carried away on that leap of faith, and that all we can say is that some infatuations last longer than others, and it's not necessarily us. It might be the other person or something else that causes this particular love to fail or dwindle away. And it might even be, in 10 minutes, or as opposed to maybe just 1 year, as opposed to 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, infatuation is like the spark. Go ahead.
This great Japanese woman, Ono no Komachi, and one of her little poems goes something like, more fragile than a dewdrop, is the flower of a lover's mind. And so you can make that leap of faith, and then the other person can suddenly and mysteriously fall out of love with you. And that makes the whole thing so interesting. It means that we can't we can't expect necessarily to achieve what we are hoping to achieve in our desire. That doesn't make the desire any less real or profound or true. It just means that since love requires at least two people, we can't always expect results.
Yeah. I mean, I tend to blame the construct. I tend to blame the past 6,000-7,000 years of civilization, of like patri civilization, which is, based on a false consciousness, in my opinion. And so, fitting a natural love in this cultural prison, so to speak, in my view, is the main problem. And I do not really blame, each one of us. I because I think that we're all crippled by our, upbringing, by our sense of logic, by our sentence structure, our very understanding of what's going on. We tend to reverse the natural, within our culture. So
yeah, I understand. I think you're right.
Yeah. But I do think that, since we kind of like separated sex from procreation in the 70s, I guess, around, after World War II, slowly, the same scientists who, I guess, the type of mind, who created the nuclear bomb, then, created like artificial insemination and paternity tests, birth control, all of that, right?
That's right.
Suddenly we had the sexual revolution, but the sexual revolution came because, there was, for the first time in human history, a way to, find paternity and control procreation without having to basically like imprison, right, the womb, the uterus for the span of its like fertility years.
Yeah, you are so right, and I always thought that the wide dissemination of the pill and condoms and IUDs and all those things was such a boon for women, and of course such a relief for men with integrity. Before then, you could have a man without integrity who could promise a woman he was going to marry her, and then he could get her pregnant, and then he could deny paternity, and she was ruined. It was really disgusting. And now, a woman doesn't have to worry about getting pregnant if she doesn't want to. I'm always happy, to see ladies taking their sexuality in their own hands. I remember one prostitute I wanted to photograph in Pakistan, in this very, very conservative Muslim area, where all the women wore burqas. And so I asked my rickshaw driver if I could photograph one. So he went to this one place, and a woman came out. You couldn't tell whether she was old or young or pretty. You couldn't even see her hands. And she came up to the rickshaw, and I paid her some money to take her picture there. And already, there were men coming toward us, running, throwing bricks and stones and so forth. And she ran into this apartment building, and then there was nothing that these men could do, because the next time any woman came out of that apartment building, it could have been her or it could have been anybody else. She could have come right out a second later, and they couldn't have touched her. And I thought it was great to see her, using the constriction put on her by that culture to make herself safe.
Right. Yeah.
Now, Eurydice, when you are thinking about love and desire, suppose you were going to describe what it was like, say, to someone from, well, of course, we better make it the planet Venus, don't you think? What would be more fun?
Well, I don't know my audience. I think I need to ask Elon Musk. Describe to these Venusians what?
Yeah, exactly how you define and experience desire. Because it's probably not quite the same for them, given that they have 7 sexes, and their wings are also saw blades that can sing. It's probably a little different for them, I guess.
Desire, again, these are all things for me where words fail, because especially English words, English is such a practical, business-like language that makes it even harder. Some older languages, like mine, are always metaphorical, saying something but always implying much more, and the words kind of like string together to create more words, and they are a little easier to use for this sort of topic. But I would say desire is, something greater than the self, and something that connects to timelessness. And if we have a sense of the divine, then to that as well. If we have a sense of like awe in nature, to that as well. So for me, the way I experience it is I get completely sucked in into that greater, energy that's nature, or Yeah,
it's interesting that you say timelessness, because there can be times when you're with someone whom you love, and you can't tell whether 20 minutes has passed,
right.
or whether it's been 4 or 5 hours, and everything is serene and exciting at the same time. It's one of those many strange phenomena of love. You can't exactly say it's a paradox, but it's as if time is timeless. When you bring in pleasure into that timelessness, then it becomes even more complicated, because sexual pleasure has urgent desire, excitation of desire within it, and it's heading toward the orgasm. But the orgasm is not by any means all of it. It's not as if we're sitting in a restaurant with an empty plate before us, and we're just waiting and waiting and waiting for a little bit of food, and then we eat the food and the whole thing is done. It's more like we're getting more and more full, and the progress of our fullness or of our desire approaching orgasm is in of itself part of the pleasure. But what if you actually never got there? Would that be pleasure, or would it eventually become agony? I don't know.
I don't think it's, well, I think it's a state of mind, So let's backtrack for a moment. When you said it feels, like a contradiction, I just think it's very clearly an intellectual contradiction. So,
Yes.
Not natural, but yes, intellectual. I do, I totally agree. It's where you feel that all is well with the world, which is such a rare feeling, because we're so used to feel anxiety, injustice, that, we've been wronged, all kinds of like traumatic feelings and responses to the world. So when all of that kind of like fades away, that's the sense of being in love, of being satisfied, And I think that our culture does not like that, because it makes us less, less prone to like consume, less prone to overwork, less prone to react to, the kind of like temptations of the world, right? So it's bad for the economy, for example. It's bad for nationalism, for example. It's bad for fanaticism of all kinds. Yeah. So the culture doesn't really want us to be, like starry-eyed in love with each other. Because it has a very different goal. And the goal of the culture is the dominion, right? Dominating nature.
Yes.
And love is nature. So it defies, when love blooms and, as desire or even more, it defies the project of culture. So this is the back and forth.
That's true. And of course, Eurydice, love is also submission to the beautiful goddess. I guess it's submission. Yeah, it doesn't feel like that to me, but yeah, I guess it must be more so for the male who, has been trained to, I guess, go out there and conquer, and take and
this is my theory. My theory of capitalism, this is parentheses, but I think you're going to get a kick out of it. My theory of capitalism is that it's the male gaze. Because, this, capitalism starts with this idea of like, I see something and I want it for my own, right? Like, instead of I see something and I'm in awe of its beauty, like I see a beautiful piece of land or a gorgeous tree or, the beach, or so it doesn't have to be just a person. Beauty of all kinds, right? And rather than just wanting to enjoy it and feel like feel yourself in it as part of it, the male wants to at least the patriarchy male, right? I'm not speaking about the natural male.
I'll try and be a good boy.
Wants to possess it, right? And so that's the kind of like the way our economy, functions. It's like a tree has really no value unless we cut it and make it lumber, right? Unless we use what attracts us, and then that's how we monetize it. But yeah, overall, like, so I think like it's the almost like the rapist gaze, so like the capitalism is like rape culture, it's the gaze of like the colonizer, so in the old culture, on Lesbos, that's what we describe as the evil eye, and we're all like taught to recognize it. There are, spells and things that you can do, so if you're affected by it, to kind of escape its focus. But again, we don't think that the person who has the evil eye is guilty or culpable, which is what I think is so interesting, like...
that's very interesting.
Right. My grandmothers, my one grandmother believed to her dying day that she lost 4 children, in the pink of health to the evil eye, right? But when I was a kid, all of the adults felt that I was very vulnerable to the evil eye. That they had like all the theories of like so and so looked at you and you immediately like fell or whatever, because I was a little bit like a changeling. But what's interesting is that they would never blame the person. They would say he's possessed by the evil eye. This greed kind of thing. The covetous eye, like kind of like took someone over without them even knowing it. You yourself don't know when you have it. It's a very interesting system.
Well, that's interesting because you think about the story of King Midas, and ultimately, you do feel sorry for him. You don't think, here is someone who is evil. You just think, here is someone who got possessed by greed, and suddenly it's not working out so well.
Yeah. Which leads me to the idea of like love as possession, right? The idea of I love you, therefore, you're mine, which I think is impossible. I think that no matter what, we can never really know what's in someone's mind, psyche, consciousness at all times. I mean, they hardly know themselves, and even if they did know, they would hardly be able to translate that.
That's true. But, I will say that it can be very, very sweet if you and your lover play games of mineness and thyness. If your lover tells you, oh, yeah, now you belong to me and you're mine, that can be really, really exciting, and then 5 minutes later it can be, okay, now you're mine. And then I think that sort of playing at possession, it can be very sweet. It's a way of saying, oh, I'm so attracted to you, I wish I could keep you close to me forever, even though you know that that's not going to happen. It's when you start dictating. Okay, now you're mine. Now it doesn't matter how you feel and how I feel. You have to do this and you can't do that. That's when it's really horrible.
Yeah, but yeah, it's the expectation, and what people take for granted. So like when they take away from their loved one the freedom of choice, the freedom to make up, their mind, to change again and again and again. That's, I think, where, some of the trust gets lost. So I think like the more you respect each other and allow each other to evolve and change, the better the chance to stay together and still be, belong to each other, right?
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
It's like revision.
It's of course also
you know that
another
as
one
a
of these
writer.
very strange paradoxes that what attracted you in the other person may be something that you're not allowed to keep. That's going to go away, and then you have to find something else to be attracted to.
Like what?
Well, suppose, for instance, that one person was older than the other.
Mm-hmm.
And so the younger person went to the older person for knowledge about books or other things like that. And then after a while, maybe the person who wants to give her knowledge is attracted to her because she's so interested, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there comes a time when the younger one has grown up and they're more equal, and then suddenly she doesn't want to receive, she wants to give, and that's good and natural and wonderful. But it also means that everything has to change.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's sort of what you were talking about, I think.
Yeah, I'm saying, I'm saying that people change what they like, both sexually and, physically and intellectually, politically. We just change. We change all the time. So if our
right.
partner
Instance,
is open to
one
this...
of the most difficult things, for someone who loved you, Eurydice, would be that person would have to accept the fact that you just keep getting more and more beautiful every second. Nothing that he can do about it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
So what are you going to do for Valentine's Day?
Your gift with words, Bill.
You were making an interesting point, talking about the separation of sex from procreation, why that's been so difficult, and it clearly, I think, has an economic explanation.
Mm-hmm.
If two people could get together and create a child easily and pleasurably, and then the child would be born full grown, so requiring no responsibility, and if everyone had an on-off switch for just plain orgasms versus procreation, I think there would be no problem at all. No one would think anything about it. But because having a child is such a tremendous cost in resources, and also for many people an investment, for old age, and suddenly there become all kinds of reasons for and against having sex. And I think that unfortunate coupling can be very, very detrimental to love. There can be times when people will say, "Oh no, I can't get married because I can't afford a child," or "No, I'll marry you, but I want to have at least 6 or 7 children in case 3 of them die, and we need some to take care of us in old age." And then it becomes all about the kids, and then the love has to change to match that.
Yeah. No, I agree. I've always felt that there is nothing less romantic than children and parenting, and that, and I think it's unhealthy. I personally, I think it's sick. I think I think it's a disease, but that's me. I think it's a social disease, the nuclear family, that we force, children to be stuck in this kind of like, unholy trinity, of the mother and the father with their sexual, psychosocial and, romantic passions at full steam. And then you have like innocent children who just need, love and care and education and not that exposure. I think that it just causes scars in everyone, and then it hurts their own chances, their own future chances at healthy and happy love lives. So, yeah, in my dream world,
that if kids were all raised in collectives like in kibbutzim, that in the long run, that would be a really wonderful thing? Or do you think that there would be a significant loss because you wouldn't get to have the intimate love with your own child?
No, I don't think the collective, collective in the sense of like, an extended family, a support system, right? So it's not just one parent, yes, but I don't believe in the collective beyond that. I do think that the intimacy, must come before everything, and not for the parent so much, or not for the parent wanting to be taken care of by the child, but because the child needs to know, from the newborn needs to know that no matter what, she or he is the priority, and no matter what, she or he will be, like looked after, heard. That's what gives us our confidence for the rest of our lives, right? So that's why that intimacy is so important. No, in my dream world, I guess parents would live apart. Mothers and fathers would live separately, and they would, depending on who they each are and what their interests are and how much, time and commitment, and so depending really on the people, they would agree and negotiate what parenting would each do and where and how. But I think they should live apart. I don't think that cohabitation is good for the kids.
Interesting. Probably not many people think as you do. And
because the whole agrarian system.
Not many people have perfect cohabitation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, the whole, I think the cohabitation comes from the need to domesticate and basically, isolate the woman during her procreant year, right? The woman with the B, the womb, and so the agrarian age, with the beginning of the agrarian age, basically, this is the system that was invented, and we have come out of that a while now. I mean, we went through the industrial era, right? Now we're almost in the digital era, and instead of kind of letting go of these habits that made sense then, but no longer make sense because we no longer have to kind of like have a physical supervision, and control of like the the procreative function, right, of the machine of making babies, that happens to be inside the woman. We no longer have to do that, but we're still keeping up the same system. And because it doesn't work for us, what we're doing, rather than change this dumb system, what we're doing is we're, pulling further and further away from the body, as if it's our body's fault, and we're finding refuge in the metaverse or avatars or unsubstantiated existence, which is it's a delusion of the moment or the century. But I think that cohabitation is no longer needed.
Maybe it might be nice, if the people who love each other can cohabit in old age.
Oh, yeah, that would be nice, yes.
Their bodies are starting to fail, and they maybe can help each other a little bit more.
Yeah.
It would be interesting to think of certain things being encouraged only in old age.
Yeah.
I think
I agree.
Aztecs, had a death penalty for drinking pulque, their form of alcohol, until you were 50. 50, of course, was ancient for them. And then when you were 50, you could drink all you wanted.
Oh, that's funny.
And there's something kind of appealing about that kind of dichotomy.
Yeah.
Even though I would also probably try to sneak all the pulque I could when I was 16 or 36 or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm going to go back for a second, but my ideal of this is that we cohabit as we want. We move in with anyone we want. We move in, we move out, at any age. It's for me, it's specific for procreation. That when, the pregnant person, decides to keep the child and goes through the nesting instinct, that nesting is done by herself, for her and the child, in a separate abode.
I think you're right.
That's all.
I think that, a child, a fetus should be considered, an addition to the collective wealth and a drain at the public expense. It shouldn't be okay, these two people just had a baby, so we have to get child support from the father because the woman can't do it on her own, and the woman has to do this and that.
Yeah.
It would make so much more sense if you said, okay, here's a new baby, so of course, a certain amount of gross domestic product is just going to go for that, and then the woman can leave if she's pregnant, and there won't be any but emotional repercussions.
And but you don't have to break up, you see. That's what I'm saying. To me, I don't think that the relationship needs to change. I mean, she can still go to the father for sex and pleasure and whatever else, for dates. This is not about relationship. I'm just saying that the place, the theater of the child's life, I think, should be apart from the theater of the sex and love and drama and relationship and whatnot. And I agree with you 100%. I think that the collective should support
of the sex life. Who is going to be the main actress?
Huh? The main actress of the play?
Yeah, well, if you're going to the theater, you want to see a performance, right? So there's going to be a lot of eros and agape, and who knows, maybe a little kinky, low-level Thanatos for some S&M. Who can say? But it's going to be quite a performance, and I wonder who you thought the lead actress would be.
Well, I know who you're thinking, Sappho. We have to have Sappho in the part.
Of course, that's right.
Yeah. Well, Well, that's a happy thought. Yeah. Have you written any erotica? Speaking of writing plays about eros.
Yeah, well, when I wrote The Lesbian, my last novel, it could be considered erotica, although a lot of people thought it was quite disgusting. For them, it was a turnoff, but everybody's different.
Yes, everybody's different. Yeah. And I definitely sex in words is frightening. It's off-putting. Because it's not natural, and yet without trying that, we can't reconcile, right, our nature with our culture. So we have to keep trying, but it does feel uncomfortable and even a violation. But that's because it violates that kind of taboo separation between mind and body. Yeah. So I wrote a book, a little erotica story. It's called Eve's Academy, and one of our common friends, I think, published it under New Age editions. And the challenge is, for me, in general, writing erotic text is not, finding the words and the tone so that it doesn't become smut, but it also doesn't become sentimental, right? Keeping out the romantic sentimentalism, but also, keeping it lyrical and unexpected, right?
That's true, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Eurydice, any smut that gives me an orgasm, I consider great literature.
Well, there's a literary criterion for you. Well, I think we can wrap it up right there.
Okay.
Thank you for coming, Bill. I loved the conversation. And everybody...
thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I always love talking with you about love. What could be better? Yeah,
well, you have to come back. And everybody out there, until next week, keep speaking sex. If I could make love incessantly, I would be God.